Hey everyone! Today I'm going to show you how to make more pet supplies for your stuffed animals, including a bed, cat tower, and Hidey House. Now let's get started! Okay, so I'm going to start with the bed, which I'd say is actually the hardest out of all three because it involves sewing, but I'll tell you about a simpler version at the end. And I'm going to first grab this pattern I made. It's really easy. You really just want to start with a rectangle for the base, however big your stuffed animal's pet is, and then just add tabs to the sides however tall you want them to be. And one I made curved so it would be like, where the pet walks in and out, but all the sides turned out pretty short anyway, so it doesn't really matter. If this size looks right for you, I'll leave the printable version in the description box, or you could always print it out at a different scale. Okay, so I'm first cutting out my pattern out of a more colorful, just like plain cotton fabric material. And this is going to be the outside of the bed, but for the inside I want something fuzzier, so I'm using Sherpa. But you could also use fleece or just the same fabric. So now I'm going to pin these together good side to good side, and I'm basically going to cut this out as just one big rectangle, because I think it can be a little hard to sew really close to like the open edge of Sherpa. So I can just trim off any extra at the end. Now I'm going to use a straight stitch to sew around the perimeter of this first piece, but I'm going to make sure to leave an opening a couple inches wide on one of the sides so I can eventually turn this inside out. After doing that, I can trim off the extra corners that I didn't cut earlier. Then I can turn it inside out, making sure to poke out all of those corners from the tabs, and at first it's kind of confusing because it looks nothing like the shape I was going for, but I just had to find those tabs in the side to get it back to the shape. Next, I'm going to do something optional, which is sewing a rectangle, which basically is just going to exclude all of the sides. That way I can stuff it and make the bottom more cushiony. But you don't have to do this. It'll also make the sides look even shorter than they already are. As I was doing this, I almost forgot to leave a space to actually stuff this, and ideally you'd want it lined up with the other space, but I accidentally left mine more to the side. But that's okay because I can still reach in, kind of going through both to stuff just the middle of this. And I'm trying to get it pretty flat and even because I don't want it too puffy. I really should have just used fabric scraps so it wouldn't end up too thick, but I just opened a bag of polyfill and was excited. After filling that out, I can close up that inner opening, and then after that I closed up the outer opening also. After that is looking adorable. I don't really know how to describe this shape, but I think I just love anything Sherpa. And now I can finally create the corners. So I'm going to fold up the sides and kind of squeeze them together with a little bit of the fuzz sticking out. And then I'm taking a needle and thread and just kind of going through both layers. And this is technically going to be a running stitch because I'm just going back and forth all the way up. And that's just so the red thread isn't covering up any of that white fuzzy corner. And I'll admit this was really hard because I was actually sewing through more layers than it looks like. So I used the scissors to help press the needle through. And then once I get to the top on my last stitch, I can put the needle through the loop that forms and then pull it tight and do that one more time to create a double knot. And that's one of the corners done. Now I just have to sew up the rest. Okay, here's how it looks when it's finally done. One more thing I could have done is sew a little rectangle in the middle to help kind of squish it down, but I thought it looked fine as it was. But if you wanted to do a simpler version of this, you could just make this all one rectangle, so it's basically a pillow, and then sew on a smaller rectangle within that, and a lot of pet beds also look like that. Now, Boo can finally sit in his bed, which I sized this for him, but it turned out a little small, so just keep that in mind. But Cheez-It here is loving it because he's got plenty of room. I made him from a felting kit back when I did that first pet supplies video, and thank you so much for everyone who commented name ideas. I did go with Cheez-It. But next I'm going to be making a cat tower that is sized perfectly for him out of some toilet paper rolls, paper towel rolls, and this duct tape roll. You could also just use toilet paper rolls to make some simple towers. Since one of these is going on top of the tape roll, I'm cutting it so it's curved and can fit right on top. And now I can just focus on the toilet paper rolls and start wrapping the outside with string. I'm technically using this brownish yarn, and that's going to be kind of the texture for the cats to scratch. But when I brought out my glue, I realized it was not liquid anymore and instead turned into this paste. And so I got curious and touched it and realized I could just kind of smear this on the toilet paper roll and then wrap a string around it. And it worked pretty well because it was thicker and stuck better. But I made sure to only add glue a little bit at a time and then wrapped that whole area with string. And I just continued doing this till I got all the way down to the bottom. You also want to make sure you kind of squish the string together so the toilet paper roll isn't showing. But my yarn was so similar in color, it's not that noticeable. For the other one, I did the exact same thing, but I started at the bottom part, which was curved, and had it curve around that edge exactly, and then as I got to the top, it kind of straightened out. Next, I'm going to cover this tape roll in some felt, but you could also just use paper if you wanted to. This will make it a little bit cozier. After cutting a piece wide enough to cover the inside as well, I'm going to make a few cuts in the sides so it's easier to fold over and cover the inside. Now I'm going to glue this on with hot glue, but if you have a sort of thicker liquid glue, that'll work too. If you just have Elmer's like me, I guess you could also just leave it out for a little bit and wait for it to thicken. Then I'm going to add glue to the inside and fold in the tabs. I was not really great at capturing this angle, but for some reason the tabs kind of had to overlap, so the inside will definitely get a little thicker. But yeah, if it's really lumpy, you can always cover the inside with one more piece of felt later, like I did. After also folding down the other side, I'm going to start making the little platforms for, the cat to actually sit on. So I'm cutting a piece of cardboard big enough for Cheez-It to sit on, and that also matches the tube. And then I need a base for the tape roll to stand on, so I'm cutting a little rectangle for that. But I didn't think about how this would all be connected, so what I should have done is made a piece long enough to fit the tape roll and another tube, but I didn't realize that till later, so I just added an extension piece. Next, I'm going to cover the smaller rectangles in felt, and I chose light blue so there'd be a little pop of color. And I basically cut a rectangle bigger than the cardboard and cut out little squares at the corner so it'd be easier to cover. Then I'm adding glue and carefully folding it over and pressing it down. After that, I'm going to go back to the tape roll and cut a long rectangle to fit inside that to make it look a little neater. But I didn't have too much of the blue felt left, so it was a little bit too skinny for the center. So I don't know if it made it look neater, but it did kind of tie in all the colors, I guess. And then off camera, I painted that base cardboard black. So now I can assemble everything by gluing the tape roll to the base cardboard. Then I glued one of the tubes to the side of that. And I didn't have the extension piece at this point, so I just had it perfectly high enough to be able to fit it on later. Then I glued the other tube to the top of the tape roll and lastly added the platforms on top of the tubes. I had it centered on the taller one and then a little off to the side for the other one because it just looked a little better. Now after going back and adding that extension piece, this cat tower is done. So now Cheez-It can lounge in the center here and also scratch the posts on the side to file his nails down maybe? I'm not really sure, I've never had a cat. But now I can move on to the last thing, which is going to be a Hidey house for bunnies or guinea pigs. I was afraid this video is already going to be too long, so I'm not going to make a full cage in this video, but maybe I'll go back and do like a YouTube short on how to make the cage. Okay, first I'm going to trace my pattern on some paperboard. This is like a cereal box. And the printable version will be a lot clearer, like where to fold, but I'm basically marking where I need to fold, and I kind of shifted it over to the left since there was already that little fold on the side since it was a cereal box. But anyways, you really just have to cut this out and fold it on the lines. And I'm having the kind of cardboard looking part face the outside since it's easier to paint. But I forgot to draw the most important part, which is the entrance to the house, so they can go inside. And there are plenty of different Hidey houses out there, but mine was inspired by the LA Guinea Pig Rescue's space houses, which are just designed the best to fit in like the corners of the cages. But if you have a guinea pig or really like them, I definitely recommend checking out their YouTube channel. They have a ton of helpful stuff on there. As I was talking, I just folded this up and taped it closed, so it should kind of look like a diamond from the top. The corner you tape should be 90 degrees. And now I need to cut out a roof for this, so I'm taking my pattern and cutting out 2 to make it extra thick, and I'm just gluing them together with a glue stick. And before I combine everything together, I'm going to paint them. So the actual house, I'm going to go for a wood look. So I made this really light tan color. And then I later streaked in some darker tan to look like kind of the wood grain. And then for the roof, usually they're like really colorful, so I went with this peachy color first. But I thought this combined with the tan was like a little bit too fleshy, so after this I repainted it light blue. And then of course I went and painted the inside of this since it was very obviously a cereal box. Okay, once they're fully dried, they looked like this. You may have to re-bend and shape the actual house part if it gets kind of bent from the wet paint. But now you just have to put this together any kind of way you want. I just used pieces of tape to connect them. And I like how I made a point to paint the inside of the house, but not the inside of the roof. And it's clearly a close-up of some cereal. But at least it doesn't show just looking at it this way. Okay, now to see if this home is really fit for some guinea pigs, I have some little friends my sister and I made a really long time ago. She's the one who came up with this idea, but I made this gray one here, and she did the rest, but she was less focused on quality and accuracy as opposed to quantity and variety. But I think they're all so cute, so I'm glad I saved them for this moment. So now it's time to see how many guinea pigs fit in this house.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Well, I thought I was going to fit more than 3, but the roof is still a great place to sit, and some guinea pigs do that, so it still counts. I also made this to fit this little rabbit figurine I made. I wasn't sure if I was going to sell it on Etsy, but it was fun to sculpt. And she's a little too tall for the entrance, but fits perfectly in the house, so I made sure it was sized for everyone. But again, you may have to print it at different scales for the exact size you want. But yeah, that's it. I will try to make the full cage eventually. So that is all the pet supplies for this video. I really hope you all enjoyed it. These were kind of all requested separately a while ago, so I'm glad I finally got to make them. Comment any more suggestions you have, and subscribe if you haven't already. I'll see you next time. Bye! Quantity and variety instead of, what am I trying to say? Accuracy? What am I trying to say?